Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Terra Mattson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Terra is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace.
Right, so we're back. This is kind of a part two. Terra and I've been having a good time remembering our love story and trying to keep it real, the highs and the lows, and that's kind of what you get with the two of us. Is as we talk about any story, we're wanting to keep things in perspective and authentic and real. In the first part, if you haven't heard, you can go back. We really talk a little bit about where it started for us. And we dive into some of our stories as early marrieds and the whys behind choices that we wanted to make and the challenges. And we talked then, and that's sort of where we left off, about mentorship and how important it is to have examples. And they're really, don't we wish that there were more examples that we could look to of couples that aren't perfect, but are intentional about their marriage and relationship and that have been at it and enjoy it for decades. We need more of that. So today we're going to actually unpack a little bit more about the importance of mentors. We're going to talk about mentors in our lives and on how that's fueled our relationship and helped us, especially in those times of temptation and of times of difficulty and where emotions get the best of us and we kind of go dark, start thinking about, is this still what we want? And we know that as a listener, you could be coming at this from as a single and wondering, longing for a relationship, or as a single, content with being single. And you can hopefully glean principles of what it's like for folks that are in marriage and appreciate the insights and the unique challenges that they have as married couples and enter in and offer your gifts in that way. So wherever you're at today, you could be struggling in your marriage. You could be on cloud 9 and celebrating after Valentine's has just happened.
Or really disappointed.
And we hope to encourage you and bring some hope from our relationship as we share about our love story. So what is it, Terra, that when you think about the mentors for you, people that you have looked to or that we've looked to as well, that has been so helpful, that's meaningful to you? And what are some of the things that you've gleaned from, that you bring and we've gleaned from in relationship with others?
Well, I feel like there has just been an awareness that seeing marriage in real life and not just in a book is an essential ingredient in a healthy marriage. I heard that early on. I even heard that in high school, in some mentorship that I had at that time. But always watching couples, whether I knew them personally, maybe they were just from afar, all the way up to actually asking women to mentor me and couples from early on in our marriage. So we have 100% of the time in our relationship had mentors. And when they've been for seasons, some of them have just been for a couple years. And one of the key mentors we had early on in marriage, he went to the Lord or pretty soon, I think in our first few years of marriage. So that changed and shifted the way that they were mentoring us as a couple. But I always looked for couples who I could ask and just be really real and ask hard questions. So I asked about, real things about sexuality. One of the hardest periods of our marriage was having our first child.
Right.
Adonai, I went crazy. My hormones were all over the place. And I think both you and I were like, oh my gosh, who is this woman? And those mentors really just continuing to normalize for us and to help us keep the long view. So I, as a woman, always needed someone that could literally be anytime, pick up the phone. Now you can text or connect in quicker ways than we could when we were younger. But having people always available. So 1 to 2, sometimes, again, mentors are from afar. Like I know that we are trying to come alongside you, even if we don't know you, but to encourage you and to be an authentic couple as well, to say, this is how it can look. What about you, Jeff? I know you have a really, really powerful story when it comes to your grandparents and you watching them up close and personal over the years.
Yeah, well, let me just say that that is, for me, that was my primary example. When in part one, I shared about just how my home broke up and the bomb of my parents separating and then divorcing really changed my whole life. But a part of my whole life, consistent before that, and then thereafter, still consistent, were my grandparents, Dr. Gerald Bowerly and Margot Bowerly, and both are in heaven now. But they literally almost made it to 73 years of marriage, and I had a front row seat my whole life to witness their relationship together. Now they weren't perfect, and there was a lot of life that I didn't know about their journey. And yet what I witnessed in my experiences with them, and that was, I spent so many overnighters with them at their house. I did experiences with them that was just me and them, and they invited me into and made me feel really loved and special. And my grandpa taught me to fish. He taught me to camp. He gave me a love for the outdoors and creation. But he also was the one that wrote me letters. And for my whole life, I have those letters. And he would speak to me about the Lord. And more importantly, he showed me as we did things together, his love for God, his love for his grandma, not his grandma, his love for my grandma, his wife. And I got to witness firsthand their kind of principle, which was because I asked them, tell me, what's your secret, you guys? And their principle really was to outdo one another in agape love. And agape love is that friendship love. So agape love is that unconditional love for one another, where you really choose to think about doing what might be best for the other person. And they played a game, and it was a game to them, of trying to do that every day. And I saw it, the delight they had in the recognition of how they were sacrificing for one another and considering each other's needs, even before their own, not at the expense of themselves, but out of the desire to do that for one another. It was so beautiful.
Okay, so I geek out on this stuff, so bear with me. But Eros love, that's that passionate, that's the chemistry that happens in us. It is what draws us together physically. Phileo love is that friendship love. It's the companion. It's being able to do fun things together and be able to have conversations. But that agape love is that undercurrent, unconditional, like I'm going to love you even when you're being bratty kind of love. Those kinds of faithful, long-term, sustainable. So tell us, what did that look like actually in a moment? Give us a story
Mm.
of when you saw agape love happening
Mhm.
in real life.
Yeah, I mean, here's one. I mean, first of all, I witnessed my grandfather. He'd be one of the first up from the table and starting to gather dishes, and then he'd head to the kitchen and start cleaning up.
Hmm.
And he did it with a joyful spirit. And my grandmother, you could see in her face, she felt loved and respected and cared for in that, because she had spent time laboring to creating this wonderful experience that we all just enjoyed. But Grandpa led the way for me, in the sense of here's what a man does, to be a co-pilot, to be a team member in the kitchen, right? So, gosh, the principle was servant leadership, right? And both of them had that, right? Grandma had given of her time and energy to do something for us and to provide for us. So Grandpa, he wanted it to be equitable, and he had no issues in doing that. So I saw that, and he was my example. And as a result, I like to help with the dishes. And it's not like that that's my special thing, or that I love that, or yay for me. No, it's the principle is there. It's an equitable servant leadership, agape love, unconditional, and it was tangible in something as simple as doing the dishes and watching him do that consistently. Like he always did that, and that was something that grandma could count on, and that it was like this dance. They were dance partners in life, and that was just one simple expression.
That's a great example because it gets down to just the nitty gritty ways that we kind of do tit for tat. Being together almost 24 years, our 20-year anniversary this year. Don't forget, Jeff. Kidding. The
June 15th, Grandpa's birthday.
Grandpa's birthday. But just a practical, real life example. I'm guilty of keeping records of wrong. And First Corinthians says, love does not keep records. And the reason it says that is because it's in our nature, is to keep records. To do the tit for tat, to go, I was the one who did the dishes majority of the time this week. Now it's your turn. And I'm guilty of that. And so Grandma and Grandpa Bowerly, just over the years, that principle of outgiving each other with agape love, that is something that I see in you, that when you probably want to do a tit for tat, you're choosing to step up and to serve. And it inspires me to do the same, and vice versa. I hope I've done that too.
Well, you have, honey. and I've done the tit for tat. And when that happens, and when I thank God that he, through the Holy Spirit, reminds me of that's not my best. That's not my best.
Or our job.
And so, there he meets us and reminds us of what we know to be true from the scriptures, but also from that real life example of sort of Jesus in the flesh, if you will, through my grandfather. And I want to be like him. I wrote a song for him that I gave to him on a Father's Day that talks about wanting to be just like him. And
you're a lot like him, honey.
I miss him.
I know you do.
And I thank God that he gave me grandpa and grandma so that it's in my bones. And God knew I would need that to make it through the hard of not having a father in my life for most of now my life. And I love you because, and so much of my love for you is tied to what I saw and what he prayed for me. He and grandma prayed for me that I would have someone like you so that I could experience that. And I thank God that I do.
Thank you, honey. I think what you said there is so important because so much of love, people think it's about, you said so much of why I love you. I would love for you to finish because you're just an incredible woman, Terra. But that's not what this is about. I mean, I have bad days and I get ornery and I am feisty, and you married a feisty woman.
I like spicy.
I know I'm spicy.
I wanted you.
And I'm stubborn and I'm emotional and I'm wise and I'm, there's a lot of both ands, but there's this piece that you said there is you keep loving me because you saw what love looked like. And we see that in Jesus, but so much of us don't have a human example. And that is God's grace, knowing that you would need that example. And I bet you, our listeners, if you were to pause and think, God has somebody in your life somewhere that has given you a tangible example. For me, my parents' marriage is not perfect. We can all attest to that. But I will say I have watched them fight I've watched them fight, but I've watched them fight for their marriage and staying committed.
Commitment.
When you marry, as they actually met in 4th grade. I mean, that was when they were tiny. They grew up together. And there was a consistent commitment. And that is that sense of turning towards and a bigger purpose. My parents, I know, really were intentional for us, my sister and I.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what God was calling us to is to say, this is not just about Jeff and Terra. There's something bigger here, that word vocation for us. But to stay committed and to keep moving forward. And what's fun is it's like a fire that the kindling the longer it's sitting there, the deeper the coal burns,
Yeah, the hotter the coals,
the
and
hotter the coals, and
that's right.
it's richer the longer you've been together and the hard stuff you go through. And grandma and grandpa at
Mhm.
73 years had a lot of hard, so it was not easy, but they chose
Oh
to
my
serve one
gosh.
another.
Yeah. I mean, they went through the growing up, they were survivors of the Great Depression. So, and individually, they went through those experiences. They had lost an adult son in a motorcycle accident. They had a younger son who had meningitis, and I mean, just some serious challenges, highs and lows. My goodness,
Didn't he go
they
away
were.
for a time? Like he was away at war for a little bit or
Well, Grandpa
serving?
was he was in the Navy, and yes, in their early relationship, they were separated
Yeah.
by time and space, and they had wrote letters, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's their resiliency and the hard made them bonded them in a special way, and we want to emphasize that to every couple out there, especially younger couples right now. Um, your conflicts, if you don't want too much conflict, right? That would be a flag as
Get
well. But
help.
if your conflicts are opportunities for you to press in and to bond, actually. And if you can turn towards one another and actually navigate conflict by getting help, you get over those humps. You are bonded in a way that it feels victorious. It gives you memory. And the scriptures are filled with examples of memorials. God used that, and He taught us his kids to leave and remember. When the Israelites crossed the Jordan, they built a memorial, and they could physically go back and see and remember what God had done. We all forget so easily our stories and what God's done. So commitment is sometimes is the undercurrent that is steady throughout the journey of relationship and marriage, because my goodness, sometimes that's all you got is commitment, because there isn't passion, there isn't intimacy. And our mentors early on, the parents talked about passion, intimacy, and commitment. And when passion isn't there and intimacy isn't there, you got commitment, and that's sometimes what it takes. It takes you to get through the hard. But they also said that when passion and intimacy and commitment are all there in those magic moments, you should take the day off of work.
That's right. They did say that because honestly, they're not all there at the same time. We're
It's
often
it's
leaning on,
special when that
it is
happens.
really special. And those are memorials, right?
Right.
They're the sense of remembering that life is good in the midst of all the hard. I will say, I mean, time goes fast. And one of the things that I hope our daughters have really learned as they watch us is how to fight fair and to move through the hard. I feel like
Ah,
that's a life skill that we can offer if we're willing to press in when it's difficult. And one of the myths about marriage is that, the longer you've been together and longer you've been married, the easier it is. I actually don't think that's true, that it gets easier,
mm,
but I definitely think we get stronger
mhm.
and more aware, and we can name things faster. Like us, Jeff and I just know the kind of roots of our core arguments that happen
Yeah.
and learning how to reset. But we always have to keep the main thing. When I get my eyes off of Jesus and I get my eyes off of the main thing, I start to do what my flesh and my humanity, I start letting that get the best of me.
So do I.
And I would say the other hardest part was writing a book. I think we had our first baby, and then fast forward was writing our book together. We had to really test our communication skills and honoring one another, and the stress and the tension of doing that together. It was another baby, I
And
guess.
now we're trying to build a house, and my gosh, we're giving ourselves every opportunity here to really screw this up. But because people say, right,
We're feisty.
build a house, that could break a relationship.
Yeah.
Write a book together, you're right. Those are some good tests. We like a challenge,
Yeah.
and we've made it through these challenges, learning how to practice, really try to practice what we preach. Right,
Mm.
I have a voice, you have a voice, and
We're present.
we're present with one another. Why, that's the challenge of the age, being present with
It's
other
ultimate.
people for any period of time, and not taking from them, but being able to give. I mean, and actually consider and empathize where people are with people and where they are. And I mean, everybody is desperate for that kind of attention, that kind of connection. And we want to give our very best efforts to those that we love the most.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do that with each other. We're trying to do that with our girls. I would like to go back to what you said about how to model to our kids actually how conflict can happen and be resolved, right? So many homes, kids never learned because they didn't see. And parents, I grew up in this. My parents were of the persuasion that they needed to keep their conflicts away from us. And I can understand in hindsight maybe why they did, thinking that they didn't want to put the burden of their conflicts on us as
Yeah.
kids. I believe that to be true, but we didn't learn, we didn't get to see from them actually what conflict could look like or how it could be resolved. And my parents really didn't resolve a lot of conflicts, right?
So then we avoid conflict or we fear it or
We're,
we don't know how to resolve. We just have conflict and we don't know what it looks like to resolve.
so real advocacy, not to fight all the time in front of your kids, but to be intentional as a husband and a wife with about being on the same page where you can have passionate discussion, disagree, and do it out in the open, if you will. And then also acknowledge like when you lose it, when you blow it, to go to your kids and to say, I know you heard me raise my voice at your mom. I need to ask your forgiveness for that. That wasn't okay. And I've already talked to mom and asked her forgiveness first, but I know you heard that. And we've had those conversations with Addie and Nevi, and you have with them as well.
I have? I thought it was all you.
Oh, let me go get them for a second here. No, but we asked them, and right now this is sort of cutting edge for us because we've been challenged to bring our kids into essentially the dynamic to say, what was that like for you actually to
Yeah.
hear this? Or when we have a discussion where it's the four of us and you and I are disagreeing, we're asking them their perspective.
They're older now.
Right,
So
soon to be 14 and 12, and they are able to engage in a way and it feels normal or safer for them. And what are we doing? We're trying to practice and prepare them to understand what conflict looks like and actually what resolution looks like. Sometimes resolution doesn't happen like right in the moment. Sometimes it's going to happen like, yeah, we're not settled on this yet. That can happen, but then we try to give them the report about how it did get settled.
yeah, so we're giving them information about a process, not just the content. Or they might not be in the trenches of hearing our financial tensions. That's maybe too much for them. But to know that they heard our volume or the tenseness, and to not just walk around wondering what's happened. We actually will say, yeah, mom and dad are trying to figure something out that's really hard right now about this decision with building the house, or but we're going to figure it out. We're working our way through that. And it is something that helps hold us accountable as a husband and wife, too. I think for me, saying that out loud to my kids actually helps reaffirm internally, yeah, we are going to figure this out. And there's that sense of hope for marriage and hope for commitment that really is a huge part of making it the long haul. To know that we can do this, it just might take some time. And sometimes it might even take a counselor to come into the equation. Having mentors in your journey, but also a professional sometimes. That's what I've been doing for so many years. And it is such a gift. We go to counseling,
That's
Jeff
right.
and I. It's part of our rhythm to stay healthy and to have an outward perspective sometimes so that I have a voice, he has a voice, and we really stay present and not get lost in the distractions that are all around us. So there's so much that we've talked about, but maybe let's end with some good,
Mhm.
like just some nuggets. What would be something that you would maybe insider track people listening would get the juice on our marriage? Something that's a fun story. I got one, but you think of one
Hmm.
and I'll think of one.
Okay.
Okay.
Why don't you start if you got one? I don't have one yet, but it'll come.
Well, I always think about that in the reality of marriage, reality, not fantasy, reality of marriage, roses and flowers and dancing and going downtown for dates, all of that is people complain, we don't date very much, or where's the romance? And one of the things that I have learned and the research shows, and I help other couples with, is to pull on some of those romantic times because life is not that way. It just isn't. And it's not sustainable when you've got kids running around and food to put on the plate and stress of job and COVID. I mean, name it all. So, pulling on some of those sweet romantic moments that did happen early on. So, one of the ones I go back to often is early on in our dating. Jeff pulled up with his Volkswagen bus, a whole other story, but he drove a Volkswagen bus, picks me up, and takes me to Cary Park in Seattle. You know, the one on Sleepless in Seattle? Go watch that movie. It's an oldie and goodie. But we drove there. He put on some swing music and it started to rain. And it was one of the most romantic, literally Hollywood moments where we got out and we did some swing dancing in the rain over Cary Park, music blasting. I don't know where everybody went, but it was like nobody was around.
Nobody was out. It was pouring down rain.
And that's just one of those pieces. It was early on in our relationships. You've had other moments like that for sure, Jeff. That's not the only one. But being able to go back to those moments and just remember can help fill me up even in the moments today when we're in the middle of just, trying to move or all the practical things of our life. Okay, your turn.
Oh man, that was a fun time. I love that one memory. Thank you for bringing that. Well, I'll say this. I'm pretty simple to please, but here's one more recently. My gosh, one of the best surprises of my life. It's my 40th birthday.
That was a while ago. You're 44.
That's more recent than college in Cary Park.
Okay, that's fair.
And you blew my mind in surprising me and working behind the scenes with my best friend, Micah, fishing partner forever, and working with him to set up a surprise trip to a place that I'd wanted to go forever, Montana. I remember you and the girls had so much fun with the scavenger hunt that brought together this puzzle piece of letters that basically spelled Montana. And to all these fun places where you had me take the girls to tell my story. And I went to my high school campus, which really is not my high school anymore, and my junior high and my elementary. And I got to tell my story, and some of the girls got to hear what it was like for me in elementary, because they were in elementary and kind of junior high at that point. And then when I finally got the clue, we're at my favorite place, Sailor's Old Country Kitchen, and I figured out it was Montana. I couldn't believe it. I had no idea, though, that you had worked something out with my best friend at that point, and my mom and her husband, who were in the mix on this as well. But we literally fly to Montana, and we get out of the plane, and we're going to baggage. We got our bags, and now we're supposed to go to to find a car that has a sign for us. It's a 1980s some Suburban, and all of a sudden, my best buddy jumps out of the back, and he had arrived just 15 some minutes before we had from Arizona, and that's when the ultimate surprise came out. We're going on a 2-day float on the North Fork of the Flathead River, and we're fly fishing, him and me, and then I'm going to rejoin my family, and he's going to fly back to his, and we're going to have the rest of that trip. And that was one of the most incredible surprises of my life. And you just, nailed it. You know me, and you gave me such a gift, and I'll never forget that great surprise. It was incredible. Do things like that happen every day, all day, and there's passion and intimacy and romance? And is that supposed to be there every day, all day long? No. And it wasn't for my grandparents either. They chose every day to love each other practically. And did they do it perfectly? No. But man, they almost made it to 73 years of marriage. My gosh, that's incredible. And I've only met maybe one or two other, heard other stories that were even close to that or went further than that. I'm so glad we have that. And I want to be a couple like that. God willing, we'll have a story as long as He gives us years together that will be growing and growing closer, and that hopefully our lives and our marriage could be that for someone else. I want that with you, hon.
Thank you. Maybe we'll make it to 75. We'll see.
Man,
Man, that's a lot of years.
we already joke about it. Like you are deaf in one ear practically, and I mumble. We're that old couple.
Oh, we're not even that old. Okay, well, let me just put a little disclaimer in as we close up. If you're in an abusive relationship, most of what we've talked about does not apply.
That's right.
This is about the humanity of marriage and really just the hard and the ins and outs of trying to stay committed to one another and to enjoy the fruit of the commitment, passion, and intimacy of relationships. But if there's abuse, we just did in January a couple podcasts on trauma and abuse. And that is something that we are advocates for and are passionate about not promoting. And marriage and abuse can get sometimes super confusing in the church. We sometimes will value marriage over the health and safety of spouses and children. And so I just want to make sure that's clear.
That's right.
I probably should have said that early, but I want to make sure that to know that if that's your story or if you are divorced, to know that there's redemption for you,
That's
that
right.
it's not the end of your story and you don't have to wear the red letter scarlet mark the rest of your life. God is in the business of taking all of our brokenness
That's right.
and making something beautiful out of it. So it's never the end of our story. So just continue to move forward, keep learning, find safety and help. If you are in a really struggling marriage, ask for help. Do not do this alone. It's super hard to do it alone, even in a healthy marriage, let alone in a struggling marriage. And we have great passion and belief that marriage is a design from God to show the world of his love for us.
Yeah.
And we need more marriages. We need more marriages. So join us in this movement to shrink our integrity gaps,
That's
to
right.
really practice what we preach, to not just say we love one another and we're going to do till death do us part, but we're actually going to fill in the gap with doing that on a day-to-day basis. So we're just thankful for Grandma and Grandpa Bowerly's example and all the other mentors who have come alongside us,
That's right.
both personally and even just ones we watch from afar. So thank you.
Stay encouraged. Something powerful happens if you're in a relationship. If you get your eyes looking up individually to God, think of it as a triangle. At the base of the triangle is one spouse, and the base on the other side is the other. And when conflicts happen, in many cases, when you're both looking at each other. But when you lift your eyes up and you look to God, who's at the pinnacle, the top of the triangle, and you begin to travel as your focus is on him and submitting to him in your own individual relationship, you begin to travel towards him. And then look at what happens. That the pinnacle, that triangle is the narrow point, and it brings you together. And that is his, that image has helped me in many, many, many times in our journey and relationship in the hard. And let him be the center. And that's not just talk, that's real. And that's a choice.
And even if you're the only spouse in the relationship that is putting your trust in the Lord, even as you do that, you're going to get closer to your spouse, even if they're not. And so that recognition that doesn't have to be both of you at the same time, that the stars are aligning, that to take responsibility for you. That's all you can do in your marriage, and watch and see what God does. It's slow and it's not quick. Nothing we preach is fast.
Doesn't seem like that.
So, well, blessings, happy Valentine's Day, and may you really embrace the true meaning of and definition of love. 1 Corinthians 13, maybe check that out this week. Really looking forward to what's ahead. We've got some really fun interviews. Make sure you follow. You can follow me on Instagram at Terra Mattson, or Living Wholehearted at living-wholehearted on Instagram. We're also on Facebook, Jeff Terra Mattson on Facebook. And you are a part of our greater community of Living Wholehearted and Shrinking the Integrity Gap and Courageous Girls. We wanna know you. So leave a review. We read those reviews. Share these podcasts with others. Subscribe, or go to our livingwholehearted.com and subscribe to our newsletter. We want to be a part of your life and helping encourage you, and we want to know who you are. So thank you, and we're so grateful to be on this journey with you.
This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.